The Necrological Service in honor of the late Helena Z. Benitez is hereby declared open.
Okay na. Please rise for the Lord's Prayer to be sung by the Senate Choir. After the doxology, please remain standing for the singing of the Philippine National Anthem.
Magiliw, perlas na silanganan, alab ng puso, sa dibdib mo'y buhay. Lupang hinirang, duyan ka ng magiting, sa manlulupig, di ka pasisiin. Sa dagat at bundok, sa simoy at sa langit mong bagaw, may dilagang tula at awit sa paglayang minamahal. Ang kislap ng watawat mo'y tagumpay na nagdilingling. Ang bituin at araw niya kailan pa may di magdidilim. Lupa ng araw ng buwan, ating pagsinta, buhay ay langit sa piling mo. Aming ligaya na pa, may mga api, ang mamatay ng dahil sa'yo.
Please be seated. The Honorable Tañada T. Rasul will now deliver her eulogy.
Mr. Senate President, members of the Senate, Philippine Senate, past and present, members of the Benitez family, and friends. It is an honor to be here to bid farewell to an icon who has set the standard for public servants to emulate. As senator from 1968, 1972, and as a member of the Batasang Pambansa, Manang Helen has authored and co-authored laws on education, youth and development, women and family, and consumer protection. These include the National Manpower and Youth Development Act, the Philippine Eagle Protection Law, and the first National Building Code of the Philippines. She has tirelessly worked to promote women's rights and empowerment, leading the Civic Assembly for several terms. Her efforts eventually led to her becoming the first Filipina to chair the Commission on the Status of Women. Manang Helen was long ahead of her time. Long before Al Gore, Vice President of the U.S., started talking of climate change, she was already warning about the impact of climate change. She helped evolve the concept of sustainable development during 1972 in UN Conference on Environment and Development held in Sweden. Aside from the consummate public servant and diplomat, Manang Helen advocated for the promotion of our cultural identity by creating avenues for the appreciation of indigenous music and dance. This she achieved by founding the famous Bayanihan Dance Company, now known as the National Folk Dance Company of the Philippines. But all the amazing milestones in Manang Helen's life, the one closest to my heart is her lifelong role as an educator, a mantle she assumed in her association with the Philippine Women's University. Manang Helen transformed PWU to a nurturing environment for all women of diverse backgrounds. Thus, Mindanao sultans and datus would send their daughters to the Philippine Women's University, confident that their princesses will reach their full potential without any attempt to convert to Christianity. This occurred even at a time when Muslims were hesitant to expose their daughters to an environment so far different from their home. This tells you of the quality of education that Manang Helen have strive to develop at the Philippine Women's University has dispelled even the most conservative Muslims, as can be seen by the growing number of universities alumni from the Bangsamoro communities. Manang Helen was close to me and my late husband and members of my family. My younger brother Al was her technical staff in the Senate. I am deeply saddened by her passing, not only because of our personal relationship, but also because she understood and supported the Muslims of this country. Manang Helen, thank you for opening the doors to the countless number of young Muslim women. Thank you for your unwavering dedication to the preservation of our diverse cultural identities, for enabling others to understand and appreciate the beauty of indigenous traditions and customs. Manang Helen, we will miss you very much. May Allah, the Almighty, bless you and welcome you to His kingdom. I thank you.
The Honorable Wigberto E. Tañada will now deliver his eulogy.
Today, we honor a great woman, Senator Helena Z. Benitez, an educator, an environmentalist, a stateswoman, an outstanding citizen, an ardent women's rights advocate, a promoter of Philippine culture, arts and culture. All this and much more speak of a life well lived in the service of the family, the community, our nation, and humanity. Her career and lifetime achievements speak volumes about how we can and how we must work together to help build a society free of widespread poverty and high inequality, and free from the violent conflicts, disasters, and catastrophic climate change. In 1994, Senator Helena Benitez received the Pro Ecclesia and Pontifice Award from Pope John Paul II for her exemplary service as a Catholic lay leader. In 2003, Senator Helena Benitez was conferred the Mother Teresa Award, given to outstanding individuals who have dedicated their lives in the service of the poor, the destitute, and the abandoned. Within the same period, Senator Helena Benitez was inducted to the Democratic Hall of Fame International by the National Graduate University of Washington, D.C. If you ask me, what is Helena Z. Benitez to us, I will say she was our modern Renaissance woman. Senator Helena Benitez is so easy to praise because there's just so many good things to say about her. But she is also very hard to please because she lived by a high set of standards, a kind of leadership, by example, that our country badly needs today. We deserve leaders who can be worthy of public trust and our taxpayers' money. And we are happy we have models like Helena Z. Benitez, who we can hold high esteem and respect, and whom we can emulate. I first met Senator Helena Benitez through my father. In the Senate, Helena Z. Benitez and my father were seated next to each other, and they easily became good friends and found common cause in their legislative advocacies. That was in the 1960s onward. And that early, I had the opportunity to get a close look at a great person and a great Filipino leader. It's so easy for a new legislator, and a woman at that, to be intimidated in the Senate dominated by men. But Senator Helena Benitez stood tall with her ideas and advocacies, her conviction and flexibility, her decisiveness and grace under fire. In the Senate, among the very important committees she headed were on natural resources, housing, urban development and resettlement, and local governments. Well, will she be remembered for initiating the first ever comprehensive and in-depth report on the state of the Philippine environment. Senator Benitez was already articulating sustainable development long before this concept became fashionable in Philippine development discourse. It's timely and fitting then to recall her background in light of our government's continuing commitment to finally put an end to poverty and achieve sustainable development in our country. In 1972, Senator Benitez headed the Philippine delegation to the UN Conference on the Human Environment, and this was held in Stockholm, Sweden. And this gave birth to the UN Environment Program, which was considered a watershed. And that was the time when environment and climate change first entered the development map. Thereafter came the 1992 Earth Summit, the 2012 Rio Plus 20 Summit, and now the 2030 Agenda and its 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Senator Benitez walked tall among some of the great pioneers of the global environment movement, the likes of British environmentalist and economist Barbara Ward and the American anthropologist Margaret Mead, among others. Well ahead of time, together with these great women, she helped push the environmental cause into the mainstream. She was one of the 3 women mobilized by Maurice Strong, the first Director General of the UNEP, who would oversee the functioning of the UN body, which was mandated to look after the state of the global environment. More about her contribution to the environment and governance in the UN system. Senator Benitez was elected President of the Governing Council of the UNEP in Nairobi in 1975. She chaired the preliminary UN preparatory group that designated the Global Conference on Habitat in Vancouver, Canada in 1976. She also served as special advisor to the UNCED Secretary General Maurice Strong and the UNEP Executive Director Dr. Mustafa Tolba. She was the only woman in the international group of 20 experts tasked to formulate strategies for sustainable development in Indonesia in 1990. In 1990, before the Rio Summit, Senator Benitez came with her own updated version of the 1972 Philippine Environment Report in the book she had written entitled Legacy to Posterity. We are indeed proud Senator Benitez had been a significant part of the great crusades that made us feel more secure and hopeful for a more sustainable future. The story of community development would not be complete without mentioning rural reconstruction and the movement that embodies it, the Philippine Rural Reconstruction Movement, PRRM for short. And the PRRM story itself would be incomplete without mention of the name Benitez, along with that of Dr. Y.C. James Yen, the father and founder of the global rural reconstruction movement. As many of you may now already know, Senator Benitez has been with the PRRM from the time when her father, Dean Conrado Benitez, led a group of Filipino pioneers to start this movement and set on a mission of building democracy from the ground up. PRRM has come full circle with Senator Benitez getting into the helm of this movement, chairing the PRRM Board of Trustees from 1994 to 2007, and then becoming its chair emeritus up to her death. Under her watch, we have seen a dynamic transition in PRRM in its community development activities. We owe her so much for the inclusion of environment and habitat into the PRRM mission and programs, as these were not part of Dr. Yen's fourfold approach of education, health, livelihood, and self-governance. But with the onslaught of the environmental degradation taking place, Senator Benitez saw early on, and therefore she was fully convinced that community development or development as a whole cannot make progress or cannot succeed if it does not protect and manage well our environment and natural resources. For Senator Benitez, rural reconstruction is all about developing people and building sustainable communities, but this would not be achieved without protecting the environment which enables us to live in the first place. Senator Benitez, it has been a great honor and privilege to have come to know you, to have worked with you. Your ideas and your kind of leadership continue to inspire us as we carry on with our mission to help build a strong, prosperous, progressive, and peaceful Philippines. Senador Benitez, paalam. Palaging mananatili ang iyong alaala at pamana. Maraming salamat sa iyong matapat, malinis, maayos, at magiting na paglilingkod na ginawa mo sa ating bayan at para sa sambayan ng Pilipino. Maraming salamat.
The Honorable Leticia Ramos Shahani will now deliver her eulogy.
Good morning to the our Senate President and to the past and present members of the Senate, the family of the late Helena Benitez, and all friends of Tita Helen who are here today to bid her a fond farewell. It is difficult to believe that Tita Helen is no longer with us. Somehow we always felt that Tita Helen would always be around. Memorable accomplishments in many areas. I shall therefore limit myself to two areas where I felt she made a big difference: in the field of Philippine culture and in the international women's movement. I wish to thank the Benitez family, first of all, for inviting me to speak this morning and join others in praise of the Senator and a truly great Filipina. I slowly came to know what it was to be a Filipina when I enrolled in the Philippine Women's University for my interrupted high school education during the Japanese occupation in 1942. Every morning before arriving for classes at the PWU, at that time still on Taft Avenue, we had to slowly bow to the Japanese sentry stationed of Philippine Christian College. An alien element had been introduced to our otherwise uneventful daily lives: enemy occupation, and with it the uncertainty of war, armed conflict, and violence to disturb our young, unfolding lives. But inside our classrooms in PWU, despite World War II raging in countries of Southeast Asia, the emphasis on good manners and right conduct prevailed, given priority, and was not abandoned even during wartime conditions. Gentleness, kindness, good manners, we were admonished, were important parts of our Filipino heritage. And this was one of the things I learned during my many years of association with Tita Helen. She would always try to discover the good qualities of the Filipino, or what was it that made the Filipino tick? Was not this culture after all? Discovering the good in the Filipino made Tita Helen proud and happy, just as any notable accomplishment of the country or a Filipino's achievement made her proud. For Tita Helen, culture was a way of life, how we ate, how we cooked, and she was a great believer in the gospel of home economics. And above all, culture was about the values of tolerance, understanding, helping each other. In other words, the Bayanihan spirit. Tita Helen believed that our culture was rich and diverse and needed to be better known. Thus, her emphasis at PWU on culture as an important subject of a Filipina's education. And I am glad that my Muslim sister this morning recounted those pioneering efforts of PWU to bring over the families of Muslim girls from the Buenas Familias at that time, as they were known, to come and enroll and be educated at the Philippine Women's University, which was a friendly school for girls already at that time. And this is something which we should not forget as we go into the raging debate on the BBL, that our Muslim girls and women have to be educated if we are to have peace and security in the southern part of Mindanao. This is how, I suppose, Tita Helen got involved in organizing the Bayanihan Philippine Dance Group, which is now considered the main contribution of Helen Benitez and that of PWU to Philippine culture. I remember being in the Brussels World Fair, I believe that was in 1958, where the Bayanihan Dance Company performed for the first time before an international audience. And I was then a working student at the Sorbonne University, but I was so proud to see the Philippines at the international stage. Our simple rural folk dances were placed in a more dramatic theatrical context, worthy of a Broadway show, interspersed with climaxes and drama. With the charm, talent, and verve of the Bayanihan spirits, Filipino dance permanently earned the applause and recognition of the world. Her involvement in the Bayanihan Dance Company opened doors for the Philippines in the world of theater and entertainment. Once, I saw Tita Helen's name right beside that of Sol Hurok, the famous Broadway impresario, and I said to myself, Tita Helen has certainly interesting bedfellows. Tita Helen was the first Filipina to chair the United Nations Commission on the Status of Women. This was during a period when Asian women were hardly known internationally because we were always known to obey our husbands. And the leading feminists in the world came from Europe, where the feminist movement originated. But the Philippines, by tradition, had already its own community of strong women in a society where gender equality was already accepted by both the men and the women. So instead of takusa, takot sa asawa, and USA under the saya, Filipino women were liberated insofar as the UN was concerned. It was natural that a strong woman leader would emerge in the person of Helena Benitez. Tita Helen became the inspiration of other Filipinas who were later elected to chair the Commission on the Status of Women, like Ambassador Rosario Manalo and myself in 1974. Tita Helen played the role of guiding and inspiring younger generations of Filipino women to fight for their rights and dignity as women. The struggle unfortunately continues until today, when much of human trafficking and violence against women continues to blight of our women in modern Philippines. But despite her star quality and outstanding leadership talents, Tita Helen knew what it was to be a team player. I personally experienced this at the Third World Conference of Women in Nairobi. The Philippines then had heavyweights in the international conference. Ambassador Nena Manalo was chairman of the preparatory committee, which determined the paragraphs to be included in the final document. Tita Helen, already well known in UN circles, was head of the Philippine delegation. I was the Secretary General of the World Conference, who had to ensure that the final document would be adopted by consensus. Way past the hour of adjournment, the conference was still so divided on several paragraphs. My instructions from the Secretary General of the UN was that the conference should end in consensus. Paeng Salas, then head of the UN Population Fund, was there to give the Filipino ladies a helping hand. I remember going to Tita Helen in desperation at that crucial moment, pleading to her to talk to key delegations like the Russians, the Iranians, the Palestinians. And like a good soldier, Tita Helen responded to my pleadings and did what was needed. And lo and behold, the Nairobi forward-looking strategies to the year 2000 was adopted by consensus by the international community at a time when the Cold War was so violently raging all over the world. To the Benitez family, thank you for sharing Tita Helen's gifts and achievements with us. We shall continue to pray for the repose of her powerful soul, and may her legacy as a stateswoman, educator, feminist, nationalist endure for many years to come and continue to inspire our younger generations of both men and women. Thank you.
The Honorable Risa Hontiveros will now deliver her eulogy.
Sa pamilya at mga kaibigan ni Senadora Helena Zoila Tirona Benitez, kay Senate President Sen Frank at Ma'am Mila Drilon, sa lahat po ng mga kapwa ko senador, nakaraan at kasalukuyan, at sa lahat po nating gumugunita sa ating senadora ngayong umaga, magandang umaga po sa inyong lahat. Earlier this month, a cousin posted on Facebook a beautiful poem by Patricia Riley, accompanied by an equally lovely painting of a woman surrounded by butterflies, which are symbols of souls between incarnations. Part of the poem read, "Imagine a woman who acknowledges the past's influence on the present, a woman who has walked through her past, who has healed into the present. Imagine a woman who authors her own life, a woman who exerts and initiates and moves on her own behalf, who refuses to surrender except to her truest self and wisest voice. Imagine a woman who values the women in her life, a woman who sits in circles of women. Such a woman is one we celebrate this morning. In her own words, a world that's free of poverty and exclusion, a world that's more safe, more fair, more caring, more peaceful, is still far out in the horizon. But it will come one day if people work together and try hard enough to build it. These are the timeless words of Senator Helena Benitez, Senator of the Republic, environmentalist, academic, patron of culture and the arts, and most importantly, visionary. Words that predated by decades Arundhati Roy's ringing, "Another world is coming, and she is on her way." Senator Benitez, Tita Helen, as she is called by many of us, believed that this vision of a just and more compassionate world was within reach. Born at a tumultuous period in Philippine history, during the fragile beginnings of a young republic, and old enough to remember the Second World War, it must have taken extraordinary spirit to believe in possibilities for change amidst so much uncertainty and strife. This spirit becomes even more extraordinary when one considers the glass ceiling that held women down during that period, not only in the Philippines but all over the world. Tita Helen also believed that working together and trying hard enough can bring us closer to that world. And work and try she indeed did. Before environmentalism became fashionable, Senator Benitez filed important legislation protecting municipal forests and watersheds and promoting the Philippine Eagle. As an advocate of culture and the arts, she founded the Bayanihan Dance Company to promote Filipino traditional dances. But more importantly, at every turn, she shattered glass ceilings and paved the way for more women to participate in charting the destiny of our nation. As an educator, she knew how important it was for Filipino women to be educated and to find our place in institutions of higher learning. The Philippine Women's University, founded by her mother, is the first university in Asia founded by Asians. As a staunch women's advocate, she became the first Filipino chair of the United Nations Commission on the Status of Women. As a senator, just by being there, just by being in the center of gravity and effecting change, She has told generations of women who came after her that yes, it can be done. Yes, this is your time. Yes, there is room for you. And if there is no room, yes, you can push them. Nay, you should push them so they make room for you. Tita Helen pushed to make room for us. Not just Senators Letty and Santanina, not just Senator Cynthia, Senator Grace, Senator Lila, Senator Lauren, Senator Nancy, and me, but all women in politics and public service, all women who have benefited from bridging the gender gap in education, all women for whom the world of culture and the arts is home. Now, as we lay Tita Helen to rest and wish her family and loved ones, lalo na sina Rep. Albi, wish them consolation, we commit ourselves to pushing and making room to create even more spaces where Filipino women can learn, achieve, govern, and yes, dance. We commit ourselves to working towards the fair and caring world that Tita Helen envisioned. And as diminished as we are by her passing, we are set afire by her spirit and emboldened by her legacy. Senadora Helena Zoila Tirona Benitez, mula po sa aming lahat, lalo na po kaming inyong mga kabaro, marami pong salamat at mabuhay kayo magpakailanman.
The Honorable Lauren Legarda will now deliver her eulogy.
Mr. Senate President, Franklin Drilon, and Mila, my colleagues in the Senate, newly elected senators, and former senators, esteemed former legislators whom we try to emulate, members of the previous cabinet, and incumbent leaders in government, the Benitez family, Kong Albi, yes, and Joanne and Jana, Petit, and all of you present here today. I'm glad that we actually passed a unanimous Senate resolution a few years ago when Tita Helen could still walk the aisle of the Senate and be here with us. She was 100 then. And I'm glad that we did, Mr. SP, so there are no regrets now that we gave her the due respect and honor that she so richly deserved. Vision, intelligence, resilience, and innovative spirit. These are what it takes to become a true pioneer, a catalyst for change. Today, we pay tribute to a Filipina who epitomized these characteristics. Dr. Helena Benitez played so many roles and conquered numerous frontiers. She was a trailblazer, a positive and enriching force towards nation building. Aside from serving as a legislator, Dr. Benitez was an educator, an advocate of culture, champion of women's rights, civil society leader. But among all these accomplishments, I wish to highlight her role as a pioneer environmentalist. Her initiatives in the Senate allowed environmental issues to come to the forefront of national concern way back in the 60s and early 70s. Senator Benitez initiated the first comprehensive report on the state of the Philippine environment way back in 1971. She was the author of Republic Act 5752, the Municipal Forests and Watersheds Act, which mandated every city and municipality in the country to establish, develop, and maintain a permanent forest, tree park, or watershed that covered at least 2% of our territory. Decades later, in 2016, it would be good to do an environmental audit of whether the 1,632 cities and municipalities follow the Benitez law. She also authored Republic Act 6147, the Philippine Eagle Protection Act, RA 6148, the Tamarao Sanctuaries Act, RA 6239, the Forestry Profession Law, among many legislative successes. Her commitment to saving the environment extends beyond our national borders. In 1972, she headed the first Philippine delegation on the UN Conference of the Human Environment. She became the first Filipina and first woman president of the Governing Council of the United Nations Environment Program, wherein she brought various states to commit towards the preservation of the environment as a basic foundation of the continuity of life in the world. In 1992, Senator Benitez became the special advisor to Secretary General Maurice Strong of the United Nations Conference on Environment and Sustainable Development, more popularly known as the Rio Summit. As an environmentalist myself, I cannot help but be ever so grateful for her efforts to promote biodiversity conservation and sustainable development. Her initiatives paved the way for environmental laws and policies that we have now. We are here to continue the fight that she started. Today, I hope we do not only remember her contribution to the environment, but also find inspiration in her own words that we should all strive for, and I quote, "One earth in whose life-giving environment, peace, justice, respect for human rights, and equitable sharing of world's resources and opportunities will prevail and flourish." Tita Helen, thank you for your fearlessness, for your vision, for your resilience, for your innovative spirit. May you now rest in eternal peace. Thank you.
The Secretary of the Senate will now read the Senate resolution.
Resolution expressing the profound sympathy and sincere condolence of the Senate of the Philippines on the death of the Honorable Helena Z. Benitez, former senator, former assemblywoman, environmentalist, educator, advocate of culture, and civil society leader. Whereas the Honorable Helena Z. Benitez, former senator, 1967 to 1972, former member of the Interim Batasang Pambansa, 1978 to 1984, former member of the Regular Batasang Pambansa, 1984 to 1986, chairperson of the Board of Trustees of the Philippine Women's University, founder of the world-renowned Bayanihan National Folk Dance Company, 1957, environmentalist, educator, and a respected civil society leader, joined her creator on July 14, 2016 at the age of 102. Whereas born in Manila on 27 June 1914 to respected educators, she followed in her parents' footsteps by becoming an educator herself, earning several university degrees, namely Bachelor of Arts and Bachelor of Science in Education, both magna cum laude, Philippine Women's University, Master of Arts, George Washington University, USA 1939, and Postgraduate Studies, University of Chicago and Iowa State College, USA. Whereas in 1966, she became the first Filipino chairperson of the United Nations Commission on the Status of Women, which worked towards the Declaration on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, a document eventually adopted by the UN General Assembly in 1972. Whereas elected as senator in 1967, she authored significant pieces of legislation on education, manpower and youth development, family, housing, and environment, such as the Municipal Forests and Watersheds Act, Republic Act 5752, the Philippine Eagle Protection Act, Republic Act 6147, the Tamaraw Sanctuaries Act, Republic Act 6148, the Forestry Profession Law, Republic Act 6239, and the National Building Code Act, Republic Act 6541. Whereas she was instrumental in the approval of the first ever comprehensive report on the state of the Philippine environment in 1971 and in the adoption by both House of Congress of Congressional Joint Resolution Number 3, which is established basic policies to guide the country's efforts to bring social and economic development through environmental planning. Whereas she headed the first Philippine delegation to the 1972 UN Conference on the Human Environment, where various states made firm commitments to preserve the environment as a basic foundation of the continuity of life in the world. Whereas in 1992, she was asked by the UN to provide valuable advice and report to the Secretary General of the successful UN Conference of Environment Development, otherwise known as the Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro. Whereas in recognition of her lifelong devotion and immeasurable contribution to education, women in development, environment and habitat, civic and church work, diplomacy, culture, and arts, she received numerous citations and awards from different government and non-government entities, such as the Pro Ecclesia El Pontifice on June 27, 1994, Service Award from World Association of Girls Guides and Girl Scouts, WAGGGS, in 1994, the Democracy Hall of Fame International, and the Presidential Award on the Order of Sikatuna with the rank of Datu on June 4, 1998. Whereas the members of this august chamber join her family, the country, and the world in grieving over the death of a dedicated lawmaker, public servant, and global leader. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Senate to express, as it hereby expresses, the profound sympathy and sincere condolence of the Senate of the Philippines on the death of the Honorable Helena Z. Benitez, former senator, former assemblywoman, environmentalist, educator, advocate of culture, and civil society leader. Resolved further that a copy of this resolution be furnished to her bereaved family. Signed, Franklin M. Drilon, Senate President.
The Senate President, together with Senators Legarda, De Lima, and Hontiveros, will now present the resolution to the family of the late Senator Benitez.
The Tomas Benitez family, my father's family, to be here. Joanne and Jolly, of course, and Jana are here, and Nikki. Albie is not here, but Albie's son is here. Yes, please. Can we ask you to stand? Excuse me. And then my side of the family, Tom, he had 9 children, so we're a lot. And some of them have flown back. May I ask you to please stand? Conrad, Rosary, Bebet, Lika, Sunny, Willie, Jet, and Jenny's abroad. So we thank you very much for this honor. We are deeply touched. And I am also with weight. going to respond on everyone's behalf. Allow me to read a short thanks. On this special morning, peers, family, and friends come together for the late Senator Helena Z. Benitez. And on behalf of her family, I thank the distinguished members of the Senate who have not only bestowed her this honor, but have given us pause to reflect on a life much like your own, given to the service of God, country, and home. For Helen, or Tita Helen, as many of us have known her, it was her work on education, women empowerment, sustainable development, and the environment to which she focused her professional life. What a fine opportunity it is to commemorate Tita Helen today, because it brings us to think about our own lives and how we've chosen to live it. Tita Helen spent her last decades in a way that placed value and measure to her days. She scored the dailies in the morning, magazines, newspapers that came her way, carefully highlighting important events, underlining them, taking notes, all the while in her small handwriting, or sending out memos through her staff in Miranila, who are also here. Her caregiver, her librarian, her housekeeper, they're all here. While her pace slowed down professionally, Tita Helen did not disengage from life. We saw that. In taking stock of this long and fruitful life, what had come to matter was not so much Tita Helen's success, but her significance. Not what we learned, but what she taught us. What mattered to many of us were her acts of integrity, compassion, and courage. All that enriched, empowered, and encouraged us to live our own potential. She taught many of us that it was not our competence, our PhDs, our MAs, but our character that mattered. In her wake, in the past few days, we saw that it was not how many people she knew, but how many she inspired. And what mattered were not her accomplishments, but the institutions that she helped to build. We saw our best selves in her, which was why she resonated with so many of us. Our sincerest gratitude, dear members of the Senate and Senate staff, for having organized this wonderful memorial and for generously sharing your time with us. You have added meaning to this week of commemorating Tita Helen. Her life, Tita Helen's life, by allowing us in this most august of assemblies the chance to reflect on our own measured days. With her passing at the age of 102, Helena Z. Benitez has been doubly blessed by your recognition. Thank you very much.
The Necrological Service is hereby declared closed.
The PWU JASM's Rondalia. The members of the Benitez family. The members of the Benitez family can have their picture taking now. The members of the The members of the Benitez family will now have their picture taking.
I'll just tiptoe.